Have you ever wondered what happens when big dreams and greed collide, blurring the line between what's right and what's possible? Prepare yourself for a reality-based story that will make you question the true nature of war, friendship and greed. Today we are going to dive into a dark comedy and crime film, War Dogs. Before we start, I warn you that there will be spoilers ahead. The movie begins with two masked individuals pulling out a man named David Pacuz from a car's trunk and assaulting him while speaking Albanian. A third person arrives, aiming a gun at David and speaks English. The scene pauses, and we hear David's voice identifying the type of gun. He then mentions that he works as a global arms dealer. Next, as we see clips of American soldiers with military gear and guns, David explains that while some people see patriotism and heroes in a war, while he sees only valuable stuff. He says war is all about money, and those who say differently are a part of it and must stay quiet. The story then shifts back to 2005 in Miami, Florida. David works as a massage therapist, making $75 an hour, and lives with his girlfriend Iz. He wants to have more money, so he tries selling high-quality bedsheets to retirement homes. But his plan fails when he realizes no one really cares about the elderly to buy expensive bedsheets for them. Soon after, during a funeral, David meets up with his old friend Ephraim, who tells him that he has started selling guns. Later, they try to buy weed from one of the local dealers. Ephraim gives them $300, but they keep the money and use a gun to scare him off. Ephraim then gets a bigger gun from his car's trunk and fires it in the air to scare off the dealers. At night, David comes back home, hungry and high on weed, but Iz tells him that there isn't much food in the house. The next day, Ephraim invites David to his office to talk about his new business, selling guns. He reveals how he profits from the war on terrorism by supplying military equipment to the soldiers in Iraq. After smoking a bong, Ephraim shows David a website where the military gives out contracts for selling weapons. He mentions that he targets the overlooked small deals that big defense companies ignore. Despite their size, these small deals are valuable since they involve the Pentagon and can be worth millions of dollars. While going out for a snack, Ephraim explains to David that the Pentagon has to buy from small dealers like him due to a past weapons deal mishap in Iraq. As a result, the Bush government made it a rule for the Pentagon to work with both small contractors and big defense companies. Later, when David gets home, he discovers that Iz is pregnant. This worries him because he realizes that he needs to earn more money than he currently does. In the following scene, David meets Ephraim at a cafe and talks about his problems. Ephraim offers David to join him in his business, as he needs a reliable partner. Although David initially hesitates because he and his wife are against war, Ephraim persuades him that the focus is on money rather than war itself. Since David doesn't have many other options, he chooses not to pass up the opportunity. While back at home, David lies to Iz, telling her that he and Ephraim are selling bedsheets to the U.S. Army. She accepts this without any issue. Then, Ephraim guides David through the details of arms dealing and how to review government contracts. Shortly after, they establish their own company called AEY Incorporated, using funding from a local businessman, Ralph Slutsky, who is under the false impression that AEY only sells arms to protect Israel. David and Ephraim are also nicknamed War Dogs, which is actually an insulting term, meaning that they profit from the war without fighting, but they take it as a compliment. Soon, the two secure a deal with the U.S. Department of Defense to sell Berettas. But they later face a problem when David discovers that Italy has banned guns from being sent to Iraq. Ephraim suggests a way around it, sending the guns to Iraq through the neighboring country, Jordan. One night, Ephraim interrupts David at a dinner party with Iz and her friends. As they head outside, Ephraim talks about a new problem, that the guns they sent to Jordan were seized by customs. They also receive a call from their buyer, who is upset and threatens to cancel the deal. Meanwhile, Iz overhears their talk, discovering the truth about David's business, which makes her angry. As David and Iz argue in their room, Ephraim interrupts, saying that he's buying tickets to Jordan. In the next scene, David and Ephraim go to Jordan and meet with the locals to help retrieve the guns. They find out their permit has expired, so Ephraim bribes the locals to help release the shipment of the guns. A few days later, the locals provide them with a man named Marlborough, who offers to smuggle the guns to Baghdad by road. David is unsure initially, but Ephraim reassures him, and they decide to head out with Marlborough, who later reveals that it's a dangerous journey and they have only a 50% chance of survival. During their journey, they make a stop in Fallujah. When they wake up, Marlborough is missing. David exits the truck to look around and discovers a dead body nearby, which frightens him. He goes back to the truck to alert Ephraim. But Ephraim isn't shocked by the body, considering they are in a war zone. Ephraim then goes outside to pee and notices Marlboro siphoning gas. At the same time, David receives a call from Iz, who seems to forgive him for lying, though it still bothers her. Suddenly, 2 cars approach, filled with men shooting at them. Despite having an empty tank, David and Ephraim try to escape. Marlboro catches up and joins them, refueling the truck while they drive. Soon, a U.S. helicopter arrives, scaring off the attackers and saving the guys. Upon reaching Baghdad, the duo meets with Captain Santos to hand over the guns. He praises them for going through the dangerous triangle of death, and then they are paid for their efforts. Before long, the guys begin making more money and getting more contracts. They hire more people for AEY and buy expensive apartments and a pair of matching Porsche cars. Meanwhile, David and Iz become parents to a baby girl named Ella. However, Ephraim's behavior becomes increasingly egoistic. He even fires a person instantly for correcting him. Shortly after, David and Ephraim land the Afghan deal, an opportunity to supply the Afghan army with a huge amount of weapons and ammo. They travel to Las Vegas for an event called Vegas X to find potential suppliers. There, they strike an agreement with a guy named Henry Gerard, known for his success in making major army contracts and having access to large and used weapon stocks in Albania. Gerard tells them that Albania needs to dispose of these weapons, including over 100 million AK-47 rounds, because of NATO agreements. Since Gerard can't directly work with the US, he proposes handling the deal through AEY. Ephraim agrees, even though David is uneasy due to Gerard's presence on a terrorist watch list. After this, Ephraim and David travel to Albania to test the bullets. There, they are surprised to see a warehouse filled with weapons since the Cold War. Eventually, they end up securing the contract, after making fake documents to go through the audit process. However, Ephraim is unhappy after discovering that they could have earned much more money by offering a higher bid. In the following scene, David goes back home to inform his wife about him going to another trip to Albania to oversee the weapons delivery. However, Iz is packing up to leave with Ella after finding out that David lied about Iraq and also hid money in the apartment. David fails to stop her from leaving. Later, David heads to his office and prints an official 70/30% partnership form with Ephraim. Just as Ephraim comes over to give David a golden hand grenade as a gesture of friendship, David hands him the partnership agreement. Ephraim signs it, after giving David an odd look before doing so. Upon arriving in Albania, David realizes while overseeing the shipping that the ammunition originates from China. He notices the Chinese writing on the crates, which presents an issue because the U.S. Army has restricted dealings with the Chinese military industry, making Chinese ammunition banned. Then, they contact Henry, blaming him for not informing them about the origin country earlier, but Henry denies taking any responsibility. As David tries to look for alternative ammunition sellers in Albania, Ephraim arrives there with the idea to have the ammo repackaged before shipping it off. At first, David worries it's against the law, but Ephraim says they have no other choice, so David agrees. Next, their driver Bashkim introduces them to his friend Enver, who owns a packing company. Enver accepts to repackage the bullets for $100,000, which boosts their profit by nearly $3 million due to the lighter packaging. After a while, on Christmas Eve, Ephraim tells David over a call that Henry actually bought the ammo from the Albanian military and made a huge profit of 400%. This upsets Ephraim since they had to go through a lot of trouble because of the Chinese ammo. Ephraim wants to take revenge on Henry by cutting him out of the deal, but David stops him, saying that Ephraim always tries to cheat people. Ephraim gets mad on hearing this, and tears up their partnership contract in anger. Later that night, the 3 men from the beginning of the movie kidnap David and attack him because Ephraim attempted to exclude Henry from the deal. It's Henry who points the gun at David and warns him before leaving. Following this incident, David rushes to pack his belongings at his workplace. There, Enver tells David that he hasn't been paid for repackaging the ammo and warns him, mentioning that he knows about the real reason behind the repackaging. David assures Enver that he'll receive his payment. However, just as David is about to take a taxi to the airport, Bashkim's wife approaches him. She informs David that Bashkim has been missing for a while, which is very unusual. Tragically, Bashkim is never found again. On reaching back to Miami, David meets Iz and confesses to her the truth about what he did in Albania. He promises to stop his business and go back to being a massage therapist. Then they hug, and Iz says she's okay with his choice. Meanwhile, David ends his partnership with Ephraim and asks for the money he's owed, but Ephraim declines. Later, Ralph offers to mediate the situation between David and Ephraim. Ephraim proposes giving David just $200,000 for leaving the company. David then threatens to expose Ephraim's fake company documents, after which Ephraim refuses to pay David anything. Later, David receives a call from a reporter looking into the Afghan deal. He realizes he's in trouble. As he takes an elevator, he runs into Ephraim there. Ephraim pretends to be sorry for what he did and acts like they're still friends, but David sees through the act. Ephraim confesses that he is lying, and David punches him in anger. When they reach the ground floor, FBI agents are waiting outside the elevator doors, and they arrest David and Ephraim. It turns out the FBI was tipped off by Enver, who was unhappy for not being paid. The FBI had already arrested Ralph, who recorded the conversation with David and Ephraim earlier. As a result, Ephraim gets a 4-year prison sentence for various crimes tied to the Afghan deal, including conspiracy and fraud. David admits guilt, cooperating with the authorities, and gets 7 months of house arrest as his punishment. In the final scene, months later, David meets with Henry. Henry apologizes to David for kidnapping him in Albania and thanks him for not reporting him to the FBI. David asks about Bashkim, their Albanian driver, but Henry avoids answering. Instead, he offers David a suitcase of money if he stops asking questions. The movie ends, leaving David's decision uncertain. After seeing War Dogs, you'll find yourself drawn into a reality-based story of big dreams and friendship. The movie explores the complicated business of selling weapons while raising the moral questions that come along with it. The ending really leaves one wondering about the criminal choices the characters had to make. And that wraps it up for this video. Stay tuned to my channel for more fun videos.